It was a bright and warm afternoon as the charity event kicked off at the large conference hall filled with military families, veterans, and supporters from all across the country. The air buzzed with quiet conversations and the hum of music playing softly in the background. Donald Trump walked through the crowd, shaking hands with veterans and their families, offering warm smiles and polite small talk as he moved along, greeting the men and women who had served their country with honor. Each handshake seemed to carry the weight of years of service, sacrifice, and pride. But among the familiar faces of veterans, one stood out to him, a young boy standing alone on the edge of the crowd. His eyes seemed distant and empty as he looked down at the floor, clutching a small photo of his father. The boy was no older than 10, his face a mix of sadness and strength. His clothes were simple, but his shirt had a distinct image of a man in military uniform. The boy was Alex, the son of a Marine who had died in combat some time ago. While Alex didn't fully understand the depth of his loss, there was a quiet sense of loss that hung in the air around him. Trump couldn't help but notice the boy standing alone with no one around him. Alex was too shy to approach anyone, and the crowd was too busy to notice the silent grief written across his face. Trump paused for a moment as he observed the boy, sensing something in him that was hard to ignore. He had met many people over the years, but there was something about this young boy that seemed to call out to him. Without thinking, Trump stepped forward and approached Alex, who hadn't noticed his presence. At first, the moment Trump was close enough, Alex glanced up, startled, not expecting such an important figure to be standing before him. His eyes widened in surprise. Trump smiled down at him, kneeling slightly to be at his eye level, and said, "Hey there, buddy, how are you doing today?" Alex blinked twice, unsure of what to say. He had been quiet and reserved for most of the day, not feeling like he could join in the conversations of the other kids who were laughing and playing in the corners of the room. He fidgeted with the hem of his shirt, looking down nervously. He wasn't sure how to respond to the former president, the man who had led the country for so long. Trump could tell the boy was uncomfortable, so he softened his approach and added, "I can tell you're thinking about something special. Want to tell me about it?" Alex hesitated, but after a few moments, he managed to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. He said, "I miss my dad. He was a Marine and he didn't come back." Trump nodded and let the silence hang in the air for a moment. His heart ached at the words, but he stayed quiet, allowing the boy to continue at his own pace. The room around them seemed to fade away as Trump gave the boy his full attention. It was just the two of them in that space, one man who had led the country and one boy who had lost a father, but shared something deeper than most could understand. Alex's voice trembled as he spoke again, his eyes not meeting Trump's but focused instead on the ground, as if gathering courage to share more. "My dad he was always there for me," Alex said quietly. "He taught me how to play catch, how to ride my bike, how to be brave, even when I was scared. He always promised he'd come home, but he didn't." He paused for a moment, trying to hold back his tears. "I don't really know why, but I miss him a lot." Trump's face softened as he listened, his usual confident and commanding presence replaced by something quieter, something deeper. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer words of comfort just yet. Instead, he let Alex speak, truly listened to every word, allowing the young boy to share a part of himself that few could understand. It wasn't just about the loss of a father. It was about the gap left behind, the unanswered questions, the silence at the dinner table, the little things that seemed so small to others but were mountains to someone like Alex. "You know, your dad was a hero," Trump said after a long moment, his voice gentle but firm. "He did something that most people can't even imagine doing. He gave everything for this country, for people he didn't even know. And because of that, you'll always have a part of him with you, right here," Trump said, placing a hand gently on Alex's chest over his heart. Alex looked up at Trump, his expression softening slightly. He didn't know exactly what to say, but somehow the words gave him a little bit of comfort. He had heard similar things from his mom, his uncles, and his teachers. But hearing it from someone like Trump, someone who had been in charge of the entire country, someone who had met soldiers and families just like his, there was something different about it. It made it feel real, like the importance of what his dad had done was finally understood in a way that meant something. "I'm proud of him," Alex said quietly, his voice stronger now. "I just wish I could have told him that." Trump nodded slowly, a look of understanding crossing his face. "You don't have to tell him, Alex," he said softly. He knew. He knew everything about you. And every time you remember him, every time you tell someone about him, that's a way of telling him. He's always going to be proud of you, just like you're proud of him. Alex's eyes started to tear up, but he quickly wiped them away with the back of his hand. He wasn't used to showing his feelings, especially in front of strangers. But in that moment, something felt different. He felt like it was okay to feel sad, to miss his dad, but also to be proud of him. Trump stood up then, giving the boy a little space but keeping a hand on his shoulder. "You're a strong kid, Alex," Trump said with a smile. "I can tell you've got your dad's spirit in you. And remember, the whole country stands with you. Your dad's legacy is one that will never be forgotten." Alex stood a little taller, the weight of the conversation lifting just a little bit. He had heard those words before, but now they meant something more. As Trump straightened up and took a step back, Alex looked down at his shirt, the image of his dad staring back at him. For the first time that day, he didn't feel so alone. Trump stood back for a moment, observing Alex as the boy seemed to absorb the weight of his words. The room was still, the noise from the other conversations fading into the background. It felt as though time had slowed down for the two of them, leaving nothing but the connection between a young boy and an older man who had experienced life's trials in different ways, but shared an understanding of loss and sacrifice. Trump smiled softly, his gaze lingering on Alex. "You know, Alex," he said, his voice now full of conviction, "what your dad did isn't something that everyone can do." He didn't hesitate when the call came. He went out there knowing the risks, and he did it anyway. That kind of courage, that kind of bravery, it's something special. Trump stepped back, giving Alex a moment to collect his thoughts. The crowd around them had begun to stir again, but in that quiet space between them, there was an undeniable connection, a shared understanding that would linger long after the event. Trump looked at Alex for a few more seconds before reaching into his jacket pocket. The gesture caught Alex's attention immediately, and he watched curiously as Trump carefully pulled out a small, neatly folded flag. This, Trump said softly, was flown over the White House. He paused for a moment to make sure Alex was following. It was flown in honor of every person who has ever served and given their life for this country, including your dad. Alex blinked, his mouth slightly open in surprise. He didn't know what to say. The flag in Trump's hands looked so small yet so important. It was an object that carried weight, a weight not just of fabric, but of meaning, history, and sacrifice. It felt surreal to Alex that something so simple could carry such depth. "Here," Trump said, bending slightly to hand the flag to Alex. "This is for you, for your dad, for all he did, and for the strength you've shown, even though I know it's hard." Alex hesitated, looking at the flag as if he couldn't believe it was real. He had never expected anything like this, never thought someone like Trump, someone so far removed from his own world, would offer him something so personal, so meaningful. His hands shook slightly as he reached forward and took the flag. His fingers brushed against the soft fabric, and for a moment, it felt like the world had stopped moving. His dad's legacy was now physically in his hands. For a brief second, Alex thought about his dad, about all the times they had shared, all the times they would never have. The flag was a symbol of that loss, but also a symbol of something bigger, a symbol of honor, of service, and of love. As Alex looked up at Trump, his eyes began to water, but he held back the tears. He couldn't explain why, but the moment felt sacred. I don't know what to say," Alex said, his voice barely a whisper. "Thank you." Trump smiled, his expression warm and genuine. "You don't have to say anything, Alex. This flag is just a small token, but the honor is all yours. Your dad will always be remembered, and so will you." Alex stood there, holding the flag tightly to his chest, his heart swelling with emotions he couldn't quite name. He felt a little stronger in that moment, as if something inside him had shifted. For the first time, he didn't just feel like the son of a fallen soldier. He felt like a part of something much larger, part of a country, part of a legacy, part of a history that had shaped who he was. And that flag in his hands, as simple as it was, had made that real. Trump, sensing the quiet power of the moment, gave Alex a pat on the back. "You're going to do great things, I can tell. Your dad would be proud." Alex nodded, though he couldn't speak. The words were lodged somewhere deep inside, heavy and full of meaning. But somehow, the weight of the flag in his hands felt like the only thing that needed to be said. And in that moment, he knew that his father's spirit would never leave him, that it would live on in his heart, in his actions, and in every step he took from that day forward. Trump turned and began to move back toward the crowd, but not before casting one last glance over his shoulder, watching as Alex stood a little taller, holding the flag that had now become a symbol of his own strength, his own courage, and his own future. As Trump began to move back toward the rest of the crowd, Alex remained where he was, still clutching the flag to his chest. The room had resumed its usual hum of conversation, but in the space between them, everything felt still. Alex felt as if the flag had rooted him to the spot, its weight grounding him in a way he hadn't felt before. He could still feel the warmth of Trump's hand on his shoulder, a simple but powerful gesture that made him feel seen, respected, and understood. Trump didn't walk far before he stopped and turned back around, his eyes catching Alex once again. The look in his eyes softened, as if he were reflecting on something deep. Without a word, he walked back toward the young boy, making his way through the crowd once more, a quiet presence among the noise. Alex looked up, unsure of what to expect, but he didn't have time to wonder before Trump was standing in front of him again. "You know, Alex," Trump began, his voice steady but gentle, "your dad taught you something important, and you're already carrying that lesson with you." Alex looked up, confused for a moment, unsure of what Trump meant. Trump smiled, recognizing the boy's curiosity. "Your dad taught you about bravery, about standing up even when things seem impossible. You've already got that bravery inside you. I can see it. It's in the way you carry yourself, in the way you've handled everything, even when it's hard." Alex felt a strange mix of pride and disbelief at the words. He had never thought of himself that way. Brave? He'd always seen himself as just a boy who had lost his father, a boy who had to learn how to survive without someone who had always been there. But now, hearing Trump speak those words, it felt like a light had been flicked on inside him. Maybe, just maybe, he was stronger than he realized. Maybe his dad's courage had been passed on to him in ways he hadn't yet understood. Trump continued, his eyes warm as he looked directly at Alex. "There's something else your dad would want you to know. Don't ever be afraid to speak your mind. Don't be afraid to ask questions, to challenge the world around you. Your dad did that every day. He asked himself, 'What can I do to make things better?' And that's what made him a great man. And that's what's going to make you great too. The world needs people like you, Alex. People who aren't afraid to stand up and make a difference." Alex's heart raced at the words, his mind racing to keep up. The weight of what Trump was saying was sinking in, but it felt different than anything he had heard before. It wasn't just advice or encouragement, it was a call to action. A challenge to live up to something bigger than himself. Something that felt impossible, but also possible all at once. Trump gave him a soft smile, his hand resting on Alex's shoulder once more. "I want you to remember this moment. Remember that no matter what happens, no matter where life takes you, you've got the heart of a hero inside you, just like your dad did." Alex stood still for a moment, processing the weight of Trump's words. He didn't know if he could live up to the expectations being placed on him, but for the first time in his life, he felt like he could try, that he should try. His dad had been a hero, not because of the title, but because of his actions, his courage, and his heart. And now, Alex had a chance to carry that forward. It felt like the start of something he didn't have the full words for yet, but something that was beginning to take shape inside him. As Trump began to move away again, Alex looked at the flag in his hands and then back up at the man who had just given him so much more than he could have ever imagined. He felt like a part of something larger, something worth fighting for, and he knew, deep down, that he wasn't alone. His dad's legacy, and now, Trump's words, would stay with him, shaping the boy he was becoming. With a final glance, Trump nodded as if he, too, understood the significance of this moment. And as Alex stood there, holding the flag, he finally allowed himself a small, hopeful smile. As Trump walked away, his figure blending into the crowd, Alex felt a sense of calm that he hadn't experienced in a long time. The flag was still tightly held against his chest, and although the bustling noise of the event continued around him, it all seemed distant. For the first time, the world felt manageable, as if something deep within him had shifted, and he now understood the strength he carried. Strength not just from his father's legacy, but from his own growing resolve. Slowly, he turned his attention back to the room. The event had drawn a crowd of families, friends, and supporters. There were others here who had lost loved ones too, and though they didn't share the exact same story, there was an unspoken understanding between them. Alex found comfort in that. As he glanced around, he noticed a small group of children playing nearby, their laughter filling the room. They were the children of other fallen soldiers, brave souls who had made the ultimate sacrifice, just like his father. Some of them seemed so carefree, running around without a care in the world. Alex watched them for a moment, a pang of longing in his chest. He wished he could be like them, uninhibited, unburdened. But his reality was different. His father was gone, and nothing could change that. Still, there was something about seeing the other kids, their resilience in their play, that gave Alex a sense of solidarity. They had all lost something precious, but they were still here, living and moving forward. As Alex walked further into the room, holding the flag tightly in his hands, his thoughts turned back to his conversation with Trump. He hadn't expected to meet someone like him, to hear those words of encouragement. In some ways, it felt like a dream that he would hold on to for the rest of his life. Trump had spoken about bravery, courage, and the responsibility Alex carried in his father's absence. But beyond that, Trump had shared something more important: belief. Belief in Alex's potential, belief that he could carry his father's legacy, belief that the pain he carried didn't define him, but rather shaped him into someone capable of greatness. There was a lot to absorb, but Alex felt an undeniable change inside him. The weight of his grief was still there, heavy as ever, but there was a new understanding that it wasn't the only thing he carried. He had his father's strength, his father's courage, and now he had his own, a quiet but powerful resolve to move forward. It wasn't about forgetting the past, but about learning to live with it, to let it guide him, rather than hold him back. Across the room, Alex spotted his mother talking with some of the other attendees. She smiled warmly, her eyes catching his, and she motioned for him to come over. He gave her a small smile in return and made his way toward her, the flag still in his hands. When he reached her, she looked at him, her eyes softening as she saw the flag. "What's this?" she asked gently. Alex's voice was steady now, more certain than it had been in a long time. "Trump gave it to me," he said, his voice carrying a new sense of purpose. "He told me that my dad was a hero and that I'm carrying his bravery with me. He told me I can be brave too." His mother's eyes filled with unshed tears, her hand instinctively reaching for his. She knelt down to his level, placing her hand on his cheek. "You already are, Alex," she said softly. "You already are." In that moment, Alex felt the weight of his mother's love and pride. He wasn't alone. Not anymore. With the flag still clutched tightly in his hands, Alex stood tall, ready to face the future with a heart full of courage, a mind full of dreams, and a legacy that would forever guide him. And as he looked around the room, he knew that his journey was just beginning, a journey not defined by loss, but by the strength he had inherited, and the hero inside him that was waiting to emerge. The days that followed the event were a blur for Alex. The flag remained on his dresser, folded neatly, a constant reminder of the powerful encounter with Trump and the weight of the words spoken that day. But more than that, it was a symbol, something he could hold on to when the world felt too heavy. His father's legacy, the courage he had inherited, and the hope that had been planted in him by that unexpected meeting. They all sat with him now, like pieces of armor, ready to help him face whatever lay ahead. But life continued as it always did. School was hard, as it had been since his father's passing. The kids at school sometimes said the wrong things, and Alex still struggled with the loneliness that seemed to follow him wherever he went. But now, when those moments came, he could take a deep breath, touch the flag in his pocket, and remember what Trump had said. Asterisk, you're a hero too. Alex asterisk, that thought stayed with him in moments of doubt. One afternoon, a few weeks after the event, Alex sat in the school library, his favorite place to escape the world. He loved the smell of books and the quiet, the way everything seemed to slow down as soon as he stepped inside. Today, though, he wasn't lost in a book. He was deep in thought, staring out the window as snowflakes drifted gently down from the sky. He missed his dad more than he could express, and some days the ache in his heart seemed endless. Suddenly, he felt a tap on his shoulder. Startled, Alex turned around to see his classmate, Sam, standing behind him. Sam had always been kind to Alex, but they weren't exactly close friends. Still, something about the look on Sam's face made Alex pause. "Hey, Alex, can I talk to you for a sec?" Sam asked, a little hesitantly. Alex nodded, a bit confused. "Sure. What's up?" Sam sat down across from him, his eyes serious. "I've been thinking a lot lately. About your dad," he began. Alex looked down, unsure of where this was going. "I just wanted to say, I think you're really brave," Sam said quietly. "I know things have been tough, and I know we haven't talked much, but I think your dad would be proud of you." Alex's heart caught in his throat. He didn't know how to respond at first. It wasn't like he had heard these words from anyone at school before, not like this. Sam was right. They hadn't been close, and yet, here he was, acknowledging the pain Alex carried in a way that felt both comforting and surprising. "Thanks, Sam," Alex said, his voice thick with emotion. "That means a lot." He swallowed hard, trying to push back the tears threatening to well up in his eyes. Sam smiled, a small, genuine smile. "I mean it," he said, "and, if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." Alex nodded, a sense of gratitude washing over him. It wasn't often that someone reached out like this. For so long, he had felt isolated, carrying the weight of his grief alone. But Sam's words, simple but real, gave him a new sense of connection, a reminder that he didn't have to carry the weight of the world by himself. The bell rang soon after, signaling the end of the school day. As Alex packed up his things, he couldn't help but feel a shift inside himself. It wasn't a sudden transformation, but it was something, a small piece of reassurance that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone as he had once believed. Walking home, Alex thought about Sam's words. Maybe this was a new beginning. Maybe it wasn't just about surviving the pain, but about finding ways to share it, to let others in. He touched the flag in his pocket once again, the simple fabric a reminder of the strength he had inherited, not just from his father, but from the people around him. People like Trump, people like Sam, who sought his courage, even when he didn't see it in himself. As he neared home, the setting sun painted the sky with brilliant shades of pink and orange. Alex smiled, the first real smile he'd had in a long time. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid of it. He had his dad's legacy, and now, with every step forward, he was building his own, and that was enough. The weeks continued to pass, and Alex's life slowly began to take on a new rhythm. He still had moments where the weight of his grief would settle on him like a heavy fog, but now he found himself more able to navigate through it. The flag that Trump had given him remained a constant source of strength. It wasn't just an object. It had become a symbol of his father's courage and the belief that Alex, too, could be brave, just like him. His mom noticed the change in him, too. One evening, as they sat together at the dinner table, she smiled at him as she passed him his favorite meal, his dad's signature spaghetti. She had started to notice that Alex was more open, more willing to talk about his feelings, and his quiet moments of reflection were becoming less frequent. "You've been different lately," she said, setting down her plate. "It's like, I can see you healing, Alex. It makes me proud." Alex looked up at her, a soft smile playing at his lips. "I think I'm starting to understand it better, Mom. What Dad, what he was really about. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a hero because of how he lived. I think I want to live like that too." His mom's eyes filled with emotion, and she reached across the table to hold his hand. "You already are," she whispered. "Every single day you remind me of him, in the best ways." That night, as Alex lay in bed, he thought about his mom's words. He thought about the man his father had been, the man who had made choices that had cost him everything but had never wavered in his commitment to do what was right. And now, in Alex, he saw that same spirit beginning to rise. He wasn't his father, but the more he learned, the more he embraced his father's values, the more he realized that he had a power all of his own. The next morning, as Alex walked to school, he noticed something different. It wasn't just the crisp autumn air or the golden leaves that crunched beneath his feet. It was the sense that, for the first time, he was walking toward something more than just another school day. It was as if the past few weeks had given him a clarity he hadn't had before. He wasn't just walking through life, he was ready to make a difference in it. At school, things had started to change too. He and Sam had become closer, spending more time together, and even starting a project to honor fallen soldiers of the school. It wasn't much, just a small campaign to create a wall of remembrance in the school hallways, but it was something. Something that made Alex feel like he was carrying his dad's legacy forward in a tangible way. It was a way to give back, to show others that sacrifice wasn't something to be forgotten, but something to be honored. And then, one day, when Alex was walking home from school, he saw a man standing near the park, holding a sign that read, "Honoring the Fallen." The man was talking to a small group of people, telling them stories of bravery, of people who had given their all for others. Alex's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the man's face. He was a veteran, someone who had served alongside his father. The man saw Alex standing at the edge of the crowd and nodded in his direction. Alex, feeling a sudden surge of confidence, stepped forward. "Hi," Alex said, his voice steady. "My name's Alex. My dad was one of the soldiers you served with." The man's eyes softened as he took a step toward Alex. "I remember your dad, son," he said, his voice gruff but kind. "He was one of the finest men I've ever known. You've got a good heart, just like he did." Alex smiled, his chest swelling with pride. In that moment, he realized something profound, that even though his dad was no longer there in body, his spirit lived on in every conversation, in every story shared, in every person who remembered his bravery. And Alex had become a part of that story now too. As the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, Alex stood in the park with the veteran, listening to the stories of those who had come before him. He wasn't the boy who had been consumed by grief. He was becoming a young man, one who carried the weight of loss with honor, who wore his father's memory with pride, and who would one day share his own story, one of resilience, strength, and love. For the first time in a long time, Alex felt at peace. He wasn't just living for his father's legacy anymore. He was building his own. And that, in itself, was the greatest honor of all,